really, really common one is not starting with the end in mind. The venture company you're selling it, you're out licensing it to, they're going to want to see what vision you've got for the asset. We're used to working in between so many different functions that we can signpost a startup to the right expertise rather than them, maybe unnecessarily spending money and wasting money and time on something that they didn't actually need. When I work on something for someone, throughout my whole career, I really give it my all. So I only really want to give it my all if it's got to be something that I care about with people that I really enjoy working with.
Welcome to BioPharma Unscripted with Marcus Metcalfe, bringing you real conversations with the leaders, innovators and challengers transforming biotech and pharma today.
Hi Ming, lovely to see you again. Thank you so much for joining me. I know we're kind of quite new to each other, aren't we, our recent connection, but thank you, I really appreciate it.
Hi Marcus, I'm not going to say we're connected over the Glades. Local shopping centre in Bromley.
Kind of did. For everyone else, the Glades is a shopping centre in Bromley, and it's a lovely place. You've got, well, I don't know what they've got there these days, but I used to hang out there as a child, as a teenager, and Ming, you live quite close there, so yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's not relevant to this
not
podcast.
Missing out, Marcus.
No. But if anyone is in Bromley and you like shopping, the Glades is an option. So, so we connected actually because you put a really poignant post up on LinkedIn, and it was about giving your time away for free. And I love the way you positioned it because it's quite an emotive topic, and it was on point for me, and it was something I hear every day. And I was like, right, I need to talk to this lady. But we'd never spoken before, have we?
No, and thanks for reaching out, Marcus. It's been really, I've really enjoyed our chats. Yeah, and it's been great to realise that we're interested in similar things.
Yeah,
like early stage biotechs to mid-size. So.
Nicely led on there, Ming. I think we were so in terms of introduction, I mean you can probably do this better than me, but my job is placing interims and advisory consultants with biotechs and mid-sized pharma, and you do that in the regulatory space. Perhaps you could just give us a brief Ming overview so we know who you are and what you do.
Yeah, I'm a regulatory mentor for early stage biotechs and advanced therapy startups as well, and I've been in industry for 25 years. And I'm really excited about next year actually, because I'm going to launch a different kind of consulting service.
Now, we touched on this. I was interested, you said mentor, because we've touched on this in our pre-chats, and I'd like to know why you call yourself a mentor.
Because I'm not there to advise, because at the end of the day, the client decides what they do, but I'm there to guide and be a sounding board and to ask those difficult questions or have those challenging conversations that they might not ordinarily have, which helps to make their strategies a lot more and plans a lot more robust than they would have been. So that's the benefit actually in general of working with someone with a regulatory background, because we're so used to priming the team for interactions with regulatory agencies that actually we always say it's better that we ask those difficult questions and help you prepare for that internally before you go externally. So if you were going to extend that thinking, to me, it's a no-brainer. Why would you not involve regulatory when you're preparing for pitches as well? Yeah. And I don't really hear much of that happening. Having spoken to a few, I think that's where they're missing a trick.
Okay, which leads us in, because I think the common theme we have is we probably have a similar-ish customer base, which is the earlier stage biotechs or smaller organisms. It doesn't have to be, but I would say early mid-sized pharma. I guess the thing that would be helpful, perhaps for people watching this, is what scenarios do you come into in terms of the common pitfalls that you find with early stage biotechs? What is it? If we focus particularly on that point, what do you find?
A really, really common one is not starting with the end in mind.
Right.
I appreciate that some of these startups will sell out. They'll exit early on.
Yeah.
I get that. But even if you exit early on, let's say after you've done your couple of your initial stage clinical trials, that the venture company you're selling it, you're out licensing it to, they're going to want to see what vision you've got for the asset.
Mm-hmm.
They might already have their own ideas, but it's like selling a house. You don't sell it when it's completely messy and in a horrible state. You want someone to see that, imagine themselves living there. And to some degree, you're doing a similar thing with your startup that you're selling out. And that also comes down to your assets. So you really need to have a well thought out, a strategy of what your longer term vision is for the asset. And also when it comes to a regulatory standpoint, it's really helpful if you've had some kind of external validation from the regulators. So that could be, for example, getting things like prime or breakthrough fast track designations, which are for those drugs that are high unmet medical need. And they're for really innovative products. So I know some people query the value of those, but really what it does is it gives you access to more support from the agencies and earlier dialogue. And quite often you're higher in the priority list than other drugs that don't have those kind of designations. And then from an EU standpoint, you can go for, if you're in an advanced therapy or an ATMP, you can go for an EMA ATMP classification that helps to confirm that you're such a product if you're a bit borderline and you're not sure, which gives you clarity about which kinds of grants you can access as well, or which category you fall into. But they also have another procedure that you can go for where you can send in a draft dossier, and they appreciate it's early stage, so you won't have filled in all the gaps, but they'll do an assessment of where do they think are you going on the right lines for your eventual MAA? And that can also be quite useful to have in the data room when it comes to doing your beauty pageant with potential buyers.
Okay. So this scenario, I mean, in terms of the work you do, that's one of the common ones, is it? Is actually really...
Well, I've just talked about the value. So often I'm engaged when clients haven't started with the end in mind.
Right. How does that come about? I mean, how do you, because I mean, I'm, like you, I'm probably out there pitching business, but how do you even engineer that conversation? How do you uncover that is a problem for the company?
Well, usually I'm brought in when they're stuck in a rut. Yes. And I go in.
Guys,
and
you should have done this before.
And I go in and I help them fix the problem.
Yeah.
That's what I do. So, for example,
is it fixable still? I mean, is it,
Oh, well, with me, I love a challenge.
Yeah.
Like a dog with a bone. So,
why do an easy job?
Yeah. So for one client, they had I came in and they just filed their clinical trial application, and they had a regulatory consultant, but they were a CMC regulatory consultant.
Right.
That isn't quite the same. And this is the other problem.
Could you explain the difference? I know this sounds really basic, but if anyone's watching this that doesn't know the difference, that would be helpful.
So CMC stands for Chemistry Manufacturing Control. So it's more on the manufacturing side of things. And that's the other problem, because a lot of clients think that you get one regulatory consultant, we're all the same, and we're not. Yeah. Because we have different specialisms. And so they had been working with a manufacturing regulatory consultant for quite a long time because they needed that support. But then it got to a point where they realised that wasn't enough, and they needed a different skill set, which was me, where I was more on the clinical and overall aspects of regulatory development strategy.
Can I just ask, sorry to interrupt, but like for me, one of the really good consultants I work with know when it's kind of outside of their skill zone as well. So they would go, right, Mr. Client, Mrs. Client, now this is kind of not my area. However, I know people that, let me recommend Ming, because that's her. And in order to be a successful consultant, you need to be able to spot the problems before they become problems.
Exactly. And I think that's the thing. as long as they get in someone in regulatory, then that, most of the time we're pretty good at saying, actually, I think you need this resource or that resource, because sometimes they might even need other functional resources that they hadn't thought about. And that's actually the value of getting regulatory in early, because we're used to working in between so many different functions that we can signpost a startup to the right expertise, rather than them, maybe unnecessarily spending money and wasting money and time on something that they didn't actually need. So in this case, the manufacturing consultant was the one that said, I know who you need.
Oh, really? Okay. So you were recommended by this person.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, that's how it should work.
Yeah.
And then,
so what I did for them was I did a gap analysis of the clinical trial application that went in, and predicted some of the questions that came up, and then basically we had to deal with the near rejection and turn it around, and thankfully it was successful. So they've actually dosed their first patient, which is amazing.
Brilliant. Fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the goal, isn't it? You're there.
Yeah.
And I guess, and also having that independence for me, when I'm working with independent consultants and advisor, by not being in the company, that's an advantage. You don't have that pressure of feeling you need to comply just because there's a company theme or ethos. You're there purely to challenge and to make sure it it actually works the way it should.
Yeah. And the thing with me is I'm actually really fussy about who I work with, because we've got to be on the same page in terms of values.
You've got to work with them.
But also, I have got to really care about your product.
Yeah.
And I know it sounds obvious, but when I work on something for someone, throughout my whole career, I really give it my all. So I only really want to give it my all if it's got to be something that I care about, with people that I really enjoy working with.
Yeah, that's really important for me. I think, because I think a lot of people have the perception, if you're working with someone externally, I mean, we talked about the different names. You had a name for a contractor, which may not say on camera, but it's there's different perceptions, I guess, of the ability to deliver and status of someone external, but a lot of people just see it's purely a functional person to tick a box, a bottom on a seat, shall we say? But it's not, is it? Because you have to have your feet under the desk and ingrain yourself in the cultural aspects and the there's a whole wider people ethos that has to be there. And we all know if we enjoy it, we do good work, and that it's I see it every day, but not everyone gets that.
Yeah. And there's been another client actually that's been going on for a couple of years now. I think 2 years. And actually, originally I was brought in to help them with preparing for a Type B meeting with the FDA in the US. And this was off the back of the fact that they'd been successful in getting a Regenerative Medicines Advanced Therapy designation, or RMAT for short. Mm-hmm. which is a US equivalent of PRIME, but for cell and for regenerative medicines. And but the thing was, in there they had you always have an initial multidisciplinary meeting like you would do with PRIME.
Of course, yeah.
And because they are a really complex product, they're a combined advanced therapy with a medical device.
Right.
And that is super complex. Yeah. And they had about 20 pages of questions from the previous meeting, from that first meeting. No. So my remit got broadened to working on the responses for that, which made sense because it set up the Type B meeting. Yeah. And I was actually very clear with the client in telling them that I'm not a medical device regulatory expert. But I just had to get on with it.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I had already had previous experiences of working on combination products of that ilk. So, and it was really interesting because the sort of the fear from the client was whether they were going to get asked to repeat a certain huge animal study, which could have cost them over $1 million and over a year delay, which thankfully we dodged that, which was amazing.
Yeah. But
then the really interesting thing was, unfortunately, that we asked for a verbal discussion. We didn't get it, and it was consigned to written advice. And I think in hindsight, we should have really had a verbal discussion, because then I think what happened was the next clinical trial, an IND amendment got filed with the next clinical trial application. Sorry, with the next with the clinical study, and then what happened was, reading between the lines, at FDA, there were two different divisions who were involved, because it involved a medical device and an advanced therapy. And reading between the lines, there seemed to be a bit of argy-bargy between them both.
Right. Okay.
So it was almost like we were on clinical hold, but we weren't. And it was actually worse.
Yeah.
Because there was no formal channel to raise anything. But in the end, we did have a very good project manager there. And in the end, we're now moving forwards. But that's where you really need solid expertise to manage that kind of situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's abnormal. So I'm actually really curious, for anyone who's listening to this who might have gone through something similar. I'd really love it if you'd reach out to me, because I really want to know how widespread this issue is, because the thing is, unlike the EU, where you have to file amendments to your clinical trial application, and there's timelines, strict timelines, there's metrics. Yeah. Weirdly, in the US, when you file an amendment to your IND, okay, there's an informal, 30-day timeline, but there's no official. You don't get any official feedback, so you're left kind of going, do we go? Do we not go?
I hope that we can put that. I'm also sorry I'm just aware of time here. I know you've got your call in 2 minutes, so I think you're right. I mean, when we put this out, we can maybe address that question in the in the link to see, because that's the whole idea for this, is that it's actually valuable discussion. Yes, of course, it lets people know what you do and how it works, but there's so many questions, but you might just be in your silo, and you need to kind of reach out to your network and gain information to give you that perspective. So if it's okay for time, I know we've got some topics that we talked about that we're going to cover, so we might do a couple of these, but that was a really important one that I think we touched on before, some of those issues we've raised, which I think just gives hopefully people out there a window into your world and some of the problems you're addressing. With what was really good is you gave some really, relevant real world examples of that. So for now, Ming, we're going to leave it there, and I shall let you go to your next call or go to the Glades or whatever you're going to do this afternoon.
No, I am not going to the Glades.
It's really good. It's got McDonald's, everything.
I would love to talk to you again, because I'm really passionate about helping these startups earlier rather than later.
That's what we need to think about.
And I think that there's some. My way of doing strategy is actually quite different, and that's what I'm going to be. Let's
do that next time. Because you have got some ideas about that. It's really important how we position things. But the connection is how do you connect to that end client? So that's why we're doing this. We're talking about the issues, the real topics that will resonate. So it's been absolutely wonderful. I know we are new, but it's great because I love meeting new people, and where you just kind of, I feel we've clicked, not in a weird way, but it's lovely because it's just human stuff. It's great. Thank you so much. And I will be back in touch, and we'll carry on with some of the other themes that we talked about. So for now, Ming, I'll lovely leave you, and thank you again.
All right, thanks, Marcus.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to BioPharma Unscripted with Marcus Metcalfe. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and leave us a review. Connect with us on LinkedIn to join the discussion and suggest future guests. Until next time, this is Marcus Metcalfe, bringing you the voices transforming biotech and pharma today.